Plugin of the week is the Waves Scheps Parallel Particles. Andrew Scheps, working in conjunction with Waves, now has his second plugin. The first one being the Scheps 73, which is a beautiful emulation of the 1073 NeVQ. And this one is a creation all of Andrew Scheps' own processes and ways of working. It fundamentally has, it's pretty simple, straightforward. It basically has 4 different components that you're working with. You have an input and output level, which is important for all of the Artist Series plugins. When you work with any of the Artist Series plugins, one of the things that makes them functionally really change the way that they work is the way that you adjust the input and output gain. So managing that is important. So just understand that. What you have, though, is an interesting interface where you have different gain controls for thickness, air, bite, and sub. And you also have a frequency control here. That's the only additional control that you have, which is attached to the sub. And when you work with it, you can turn off any of the individual components by clicking on the little area right here. You have a nice little graphic design, which is interactive. So there's actually informational stuff going on with the visuals as you're working here. So as you see certain things here display red or orange, you're getting more heavier processing or clipping. Whereas, if you're seeing just yellow or lighter colors or green colors, you're getting less processing. This is a very dynamic processor. Although it's very simple in design and you're basically dialing in amounts of different things like air, the sub frequencies, the thickness, and the bite, they are dynamic processes. In other words, they are responding to what is being fed into them. Fundamentally, the signal flow goes like this. You have an input signal. Then you have a thickness and bite control, which is run in parallel. That's the parallel part of the particles. That runs in parallel with the dry track. So this is a parallel processing thing. And the way Andrew describes the way that he works is he likes to do a lot of parallel processing. And this has become, although it always existed, or I wouldn't say always, but it existed quite a lot in the analog realm on analog consoles. It's so much easier to do in the digital realm and the DAW realm that there's probably a lot more of it done now because of space and, tracks available and all that sort of stuff is at a premium now. So when you dial these in, you get these 2 characteristics, which are more mid-rangey characteristics, which are also, they're dynamic, so they're not equalization characteristics. And then after that, then you get more of the harmonic element that's added in with the air and the sub. And when I say this is like more synthesis, so the air is more of a synthesized air that's added in. On the top end, and on the sub, it's a sub-harmonic synthesis that's kind of brought in. So what does that mean? When I talk about these types of things, the difference between adding EQ, just adding like high frequencies, is that you also are bringing in a lot of noise. It's a static process, where this is something that is much more dynamic. It's responding to the input signal and adjusting constantly and accordingly. So it's much more like, for example, like an oral exciter, and also generating artificially upper harmonics or harmonics that are above the original frequency. So what happens is that they come in when there actually is frequency content there, and then it pulls away. So you don't get this noisy characteristic or nature that's added in. So you get this a real compressed, tight edginess that's probably a little bit more what you're looking for. Now, what I have here is I just have this on the mix bus for right now, and you can use this on individual tracks. We may split this out into just stems or onto individual tracks and just kind of give you a little bit. Maybe what I'll do is I'll just start there. Let's just start with working with a drum and bass stem here. And so we'll run a parallel here, so I don't run a very hugely long demo. But let's just start here with this, and let's just see where. So if I wanted to work on that sub frequency, so it seems to dial in a little bit, closer to 60. Usually adding some air on top is a nice balancer for the low end. This is just an amount thing here, okay? So there's no other frequency component to it. So this is a nice balance, because without the air, usually when you're dealing with sub frequencies, they usually need to be balanced with higher frequencies. And I think the way he's designed it, also this thickness working in a lower mid-range area and the bite working in a higher mid-range area, they also balance each other. And if there's not some coordinated balance between the two, it can sound with just the sub in like there's too much low end without this balancing it off. Or if I take this out and add too much air, it can thin out the track. So usually there's some kind of balance, which is a nice component of this. And now I could bring in so this is an aggressive warmth that kind of pumps in, but it's very dynamic, right? So it gives you an aggressiveness, but in a warmer frequency range where it's not hurtful or as biting. And then let's, maybe I'll kind of kick in a little bit later here as we get into the beat. And what I can do here is I can take the two of them, just shift clicking to put them in together. I can also invert them, which is not what I meant to do, but let's see here. So I can unlink the input and output here just to make up for the extra gain. And then there's an added component which I can do here. So when I link these together, when I raise this up, it's going to lower the output. So you can hear how that starts to drive the processing a bit more, right to clipping. Or I can lighten it up. All right, so this is like just like the artist series. If you're going here, like the yellow is usually a good range, orange, red starts to get more aggressive. And you can start to hear that driving, limiting kind of coming in. I'm going to err a little bit on the lighter side. Okay, so now let's just see here. What I'll do is quick and easy way. I'll bring in some guitars and maybe do this along with keys. What I'll do is I'll just load in a full reset. Close, but no cigar. There we go. This is a great place. Probably not so much for the sub, but it's certainly for the thickness. And then here, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to drive these guys a little bit more. Balance that output off a little bit. And now that I put this in, I'm not going to be able to take it off. So you could hear how like it just kind of really brings something to life. So let's take it up to the next level here where I have some keyboards. I'm just going to flip over to the chorus section here because there's a nice section there where lots of keys are going on. And we'll focus on this. Now, The thing to understand about this is it is a dynamic process. So you may think like, oh, this is fixed on a particular frequency, but it is actually responding to what frequencies are being fed into it. So it's much more dynamic than what you would expect. So it's, in other words, when you're feeding signal in, how much you drive it, the way that you drive it, and the way that I'm working it here is a big part of it. But when you put in this thickness, it will vary. It won't be exactly the same for every grouping of tracks. All right, back off and go back. Try to balance that off a little bit on the output. Maybe I'll put a little air in for those strings. So you can see how in just in this context, in this very early stage mix here, how it can really bring in a lot of presence and aliveness and kind of a finished character to everything. Just using it on the stem level here, without even getting into using it on individual tracks. And although simple in design, the important things to remember are that it is dynamically working with what you're feeding into it. So it won't be the same and the same frequencies and the same stuff every time you feed in. And also very important, if you really take away that, is the adjustment of the input level and the output level, and linking those together is really important. The other thing that's cool about this is that if you unlink them and make an adjustment to the output to sort of balance the gain, when you relink them, they will maintain that offset, and that's an important part of this. But this is a really cool one. There are more and more plugins like this where you're not necessarily knowing what's going on under the hood, but they sound really good. And this is a very cool one. Andrew Scheps is a really smart guy, really good at what he does, and has done some great work here with Waves. So a good one. Andrew Scheps, Parallel Particles, in conjunction with Waves, and that's the plugin of the week.